All right, well, let's get started. There's probably a couple folks still trickling in, but my name is Austin Scharf. I'm a senior energy policy specialist here at the Washington State Department of Commerce, where one of the topics I work on is low-income energy assistance. I'm joined today by our Assistant Director, Michael Furs, the Manager of the Energy Policy Office, Glenn Blackman, who will be showing up shortly, and James Vogel, who is our project coordinator on this particular study. Today, we're going to be talking about elements of program design focused on program administration, data collection and reporting for a statewide low-income energy assistance program design report required by the legislature. I'm going to provide some more background a little bit later, but I first want to turn it over to our Assistant Director, Michael Furs, for some opening remarks.
Thanks, Austin. Welcome, everybody. Here in Olympia, it feels very much like a fall day with as much rain falling as there is, and hope that you are warm and safe wherever you are. As Austin mentioned, this is our fourth workshop related to the legislature's request for us to deliver a statewide low-income energy assistance program design study. And we've already had a lot of participation, so I wanted to express my appreciation for that over the last three workshops and comment periods. Just want to give you a little bit of background about where we've been and what we're going to do today. So again, thanks for your engagement when it came to our overarching conversation that began this work. The first workshop was on key questions and considerations that we have used to inform our process and the report. The second conversation was around program accessibility. How would you make a program easy to access for households, especially and particularly our most vulnerable households, and do so in a manner that covers the entire state? And then the most recent conversation around program deliverability, types of bill discounts, types of trade-offs with different funding. Those have been rich and robust conversations, and I'm excited to step into the fourth conversation today, where we'll be talking about elements of program design, data collection, and reporting. And really, I think everyone knows that these aspects of program design are really going to be essential for ensuring an efficient, quality, and equitable outcomes for low-income households that would be supported by such a program. Stepping away from what we're doing today, right, we're pushing towards a June 2024 deadline to have a study that evaluates a number of program design options and recommend a design for a statewide energy assistance program as the legislature requires of us. It's just to be clear, legislature has not asked Commerce for a recommendation for creation of a program. And as I've said previously, we will not be making such a recommendation. For those keeping track of calendars at home, this is going to be the last meeting on this topic, the last workshop in this calendar year. So we will pick that up in 2024. But here at the end of September is the last workshop in this topic in 2023. While we won't be meeting, the team at Commerce is going to be working to gather more information and synthesize materials for when we get together to discuss this topic next year. Thanks again for joining us. And Austin, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Michael. All right, well, let us jump in here. I'm going to open up our slide deck. James, can you confirm that you can see our slide deck here?
Yes, I can.
All right, perfect. Well, as you all know, we're the State Energy Office here at the Department of Commerce, where our goal is to strengthen communities. And we do this in a number of ways, from small business assistance to housing and combating homelessness, and economic development, and so much more. So today we are going to be focusing on a few elements of program administration, data collection, and reporting. Some background of how we got here, as Furs was discussing, this work originates out of our Clean Energy Transformation Act law and a report that's required there. That law overarching requires for a clean, affordable, reliable, and equitable transition to 100% clean electricity by 2045. Part of that law, RCW 19405-120, or Section 120, puts requirements on our electric utilities to make programs and funding available for low-income households. And then on a biennial basis, utilities must collect and report data to Commerce and submit assessments of their programs. That information is then summarized and aggregated into a report by the Department of Commerce. We did this last year with 4 workshops and a number of comment periods. And in that report, Commerce is also tasked with evaluating additional mechanisms for assistance, including one that's identified in the law, system benefits charge, which would have a charge placed on utilities that the revenues from that charge would then go to a state administered program to fund low-income energy assistance statewide. It also requires Commerce to assess mechanisms to prioritize assistance to households that have greater costs and energy burden relative to their household income. So one of the key findings we found in that report is that utility programs serve only a small percentage, about 25% of low-income households, compared to individual statewide programs such as the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program that have similar eligibility standards. That work, that finding, and the evaluation of the system benefits charge in its led to this this proviso here, where we in the discussion in the report of a statewide approach. We found a number of benefits to this approach, including universal access to energy assistance, increased program participation, increasing targeting of assistance to those most in need. With the system benefits charge, we found that would mitigate risks of potential rate hikes, particularly for our small rural utilities, of which there are many in the state. It would reduce overall statewide administrative costs and provide a more reliable funding source with the system benefits charge in particular. We also found that we would be able to, through this approach, provide a uniform benefit level across the state. Today, utilities offer different programs with different benefits. So depending on your utility, the benefit you would receive it can be quite different. So as I said, through that CETA report and those findings around a statewide approach, there's a proviso that the legislature put in the budget, and the proviso is basically a budgetary requirement for the Department of Commerce to assess recommendations to assess a statewide energy assistance program. What would it take to put a program like that together? How would it work? That sort of thing, and then to develop recommendations there. The original deadline was a January 1st date, but that has been agreed by stakeholders and the legislature to be moved to the June 2024 date. So what all needs to be assessed in this program design? Well, of course, we need to come up with a design or a number of designs and evaluate those and make a recommendation on one. But we must consider, according to the statute, a handful of things here: data collection, universal intake and coordination and data sharing across statewide low-income programs, program eligibility, enrollment and administration, outreach and community engagement, multicultural services, funding and reporting. And I bolded some of the topics that we'll be touching on today. The other ones we have been working on through our workshops. The second bullet on universal intake coordination and data sharing has been something that we've touched on, but has been really the work within the state family to develop that, and we'll bring that to the group in 2024 with what we're finding there. So I'm not going to run through these, but as first mentioned, we've gone through a number of workshops. James has been diligent in taking notes and summarizing the comments, and those are posted on our webpage. Our comment deadline for today's workshop will be October 13th. And while this marks the last workshop of this year, there's many more to come in early 2024. So what are we doing today? Well, today, we're going to look at the data and information we need to determine funding levels for a program. We're going to look at program reporting requirements and evaluations to make sure that we're providing or that a program would be able to provide quality, efficient, and equitable outcomes for low-income households. Make sure there's transparency and accountability within the program. We're going to talk about our low-income home energy assistance program, LIHEAP, and how that's going to be integrated into a statewide program. We're going to, in particular, be asking utilities to talk about how they currently integrate LIHEAP funding into their programs, and be asking you all about what questions you have about LIHEAP. And then finally, James has prepared a kind of comment summary from our initial phase of the workshops, and he's highlighted areas of consensus, being areas that through the written comments in particular, but also through the workshops, were areas where most people agreed. And that work and the work of these workshops will help us moving forward in shaping the program design. So as we've done in past workshops, we're going to move to a Word document that James has available, and James will be taking notes today as we walk through the workshop agenda. So James, you want to share your screen?
I can, and it looks like John has a question in the chat while I navigate over.
All right. Sorry, folks, I can't see that. Will there be a report on today's workshop shared after the workshop concludes? Today, there will be the meeting notes that we share, that we post. Typically, it takes a week for us to pull the comments that we get in the chat and integrate them into the comment summary here. But I would expect at the end of the week, the summary document that James is going to be typing up, and the comments that people put in the chat will be incorporated into a document that summarizes the discussion today. There is not a report, like a draft report to review. We do have the different comments and that folks have submitted, and the summaries available on our webpage. So. All right. So we're gonna focus on these two questions up top here first, and I'm going to introduce them together, and then we'll focus on one and move to the other. So the question that these the topic that these two questions are looking at focuses on how will we determine the amount of funding needed to provide low-income energy assistance statewide to meet demand for a program. And there are a number of mechanisms that we went through at our last workshop for funding a program, and we evaluated different trade-offs of those different mechanisms. Today, we're focusing in on what information we would need to determine, how much funding would need to come from these different mechanisms. And each one is a little bit different, so the questions become a little bit more nuanced, but that's the point of these questions. So the first set of questions here is around the system benefit charge idea, which is a charge placed on electric and natural gas utilities. The funds then are rolled up into a statewide program and distributed to households. It could be, and by households, I should say, applied to customer accounts. So the mechanism, as we discussed last time, could be that the funds go onto utility accounts. That's how I think most people are thinking about it, so I don't want to confuse folks there. But in any case, it's that amount, what that charge would be, how that would be set, that we are discussing here, and what information we would need to determine what that charge would be. And then the second set of questions will look at how we would determine funding for out of the climate commitment account, which we discussed last time. The climate commitment account is a particular account that's funded through the state's economy-wide cap and trade program, so that it could come from there, or it could come from the state general fund, which we also discussed last time. If folks are unfamiliar with those, I reviewed the slides from the last workshop. So we will unpack that one when we get there. But I think the first one here is the system benefits charge and how we would go about determining that charge. So I'm going to open it up for questions, comments. Feel free to put things in the chat. I'm going to try my best to monitor the chat, but if you're familiar with these workshops, we kind of let the chat roll and as people raise their hands and comment. So. And I do see a few questions in here while people gather their thoughts. I will answer a few of these. How is energy burden calculated? Household income doesn't exist, so how do you propose to collect household data? So I would refer back to our work on energy burden, but energy burden itself is calculated as the amount above of a household's energy costs above 6% of their household income. It doesn't include transportation costs. It's merely looking at residential energy costs. How that number is calculated, can vary, but depending on program design. But the basic components are the household income and energy costs for the household. And there's a number of ways in which household income data is collected. My understanding is that the primary way in which it's done right now for the utilities is that community action agencies and others complete forms with that information, and they can calculate that number. Only a few utilities are doing it that way, though. Sean.
Sure, I'll jump in. Good to see you, Austin. This is Sean Bonfield of Vista Utilities. And I guess my first observation is that whether we're talking, it's a system level benefit charge or the Climate Commitment Act or state general fund, so that's the funding source. So I think the question for determining the need is applicable to both, regardless of where the funds actually come from. And so first, if you're going to determine the need, right, it feels like we need a statewide low-income needs assessment. And I know some of that work has been done through the Section 120 reporting, but in order to determine the pool available, you need to do that low-income needs assessment. One question I think that's been brought up previously is, what do you do with existing programs? It seems if we're going to move to a statewide model, then the utility-specific programs would go away in lieu of this statewide model. And so you'd have to just determine what's the need in the state, and then depending on the funding mechanism, obviously if it's funded through the general fund or climate commitment account, that's easier because that's your funding source to cover that. If it's a system benefits charge, you'd have to consider a couple of things. One, who's going to pay for it? Is it residential customers only? Is it residential and commercial customers for all the utilities? How do you then allocate electric to gas? Do you need retail sales data for the electric and gas side? So is it a per therm per kilowatt hour charge, or is it a per person per customer charge? So those are some of the considerations you have to think about. And if it's on a per customer basis, I guess you'd have to think about as well as if commercial customers are included, would residential and commercial customers pay the same fixed charge or not? Would small, medium, industrial sized commercial customers be assessed a different charge than a residential customer if they're charged at all? So all considerations to think about if you were to move forward with that type of model.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. You tell me a little bit more about what you're envisioning in terms of a low income needs assessment.
Sure.
I know the IOUs do a number of these on their own programs, but also, whether, this would be something different than that sort of thing.
Yeah, so I'm speaking for Avista, and I know some others. So we did a low income needs assessment to look at the number of customers that are qualified as low income, those that are eligible to receive assistance, and two, the number of customers that have a high energy burden, being energy burden above 6% on the electric side, 3% on the gas side. And so then you consider what is the excess burden, so the amount of energy burden above that threshold deemed acceptable. And that's what the assistance program should help to solve for, is that we're bringing customers down to a level that's acceptable. We don't want to overserve customers, whether it's utility programs or a statewide program. I think that is one of the risks or results that happens today in some programs, that customers are overserved. And so that's a challenge when it comes to income, to providing the appropriate amount of assistance needed. And so we would have to do that work to determine the eligible pool of customers in Washington state that could receive assistance. And then for those that are overburdened, how many of those customers and how much should they receive? Because there are some low income customers that have an energy burden below 6% or 3% on the gas side today.
Sure. Thanks, Sean. I think Mindy had her hand raised next.
Thanks, Austin. I would probably echo a lot of what we just heard. Some of those questions I have as well. I have a concern for the constitutionality / OCSN compliance for some funding that does not come from the state. And I would say that many utilities, and I will speak for Seattle City Light, have very robust customer assistance programs currently. And my concern would be, frankly, that the customer assistance, if it was a statewide program, would be not as robust as our local program. And I also think that utilities know our customers best and what their needs are. I know in our service territory, the energy burden is not necessarily very high. However, rent and the other cost of living is very, very expensive. And so I do not want to see our low income customers who are perhaps just above qualifying for assistance programs see their rates increased. I also find it difficult if this is funded by utility customers, and that's a question that we're discussing. I find it difficult to justify to our customers that they're paying in a systems benefit charge they're paying for perhaps assistance to a customer in another part of the state, not their neighbor. So I think that is a concern as well.
Thanks, Mindy. Myself on mute.
Thanks, Austin.
John.
Yeah, thanks, Austin. So I'm wondering if you've looked into how Energy Trust of Oregon handles the system benefits charge.
So my understanding is, I haven't looked at it as part of this work. Here we're really focused on a bill assistance program, and that would cover the state. And for folks who aren't familiar with the Oregon Energy Trust, it is a program that is run for the investor-owned utilities there. And that program has a charge that's set in statute. And I can't remember what the percentage is, but it's applied to those investor-owned utilities. And then the Oregon Energy Trust administers the energy efficiency, weatherization, and distributed generation programs that I think would otherwise be run by the utilities, helps coordinate workforce, a whole host of things, but a little bit different than what we're talking about here. But it is set in statute, the amount.
Okay.
But I think, there's ways in which this funding source, obviously anything that would require a system benefits charge would be something that would need to be required by the legislature. There's no authority to do that. But whether it should be set as like a straight percentage or in the statute, or should be like a forecasted amount that has requirements by the legislature for that forecast, that would be kind of one of the questions here.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I'm no expert on the details, but if there's any lessons you can learn from ETO, that would be great. I actually live in Oregon. I'm just looking at my power bill from last month, and it looks like I paid $1.40 in the system benefits charge, which is, certainly not something I'm going to balk at, and can do a lot of good for folks in the IOU territory here.
Thanks, John, for that input. And I think Mindy didn't lower her hand, so I'm going to lower your hand, Mindy. But if I raise it again, if you still had your hand up, Foster.
Yeah, thanks, Austin. Appreciate it. I would agree with Mindy on, we have tremendously good low-income programs in our utility. We do a roundup. We did done kind of exponential increases during the pandemic. We really understand our customers well. And I think I'm hesitant or a little bit surprised that if we did a statewide effort, we'd lose control over what our members, we're part of a co-op, and what our utility members are really benefiting from. We know them well. We're not one size fits all. We really look through individual case-by-case basis. We have done a needs assessment in the past, and the conclusions that we reached are there's not really good data out there, especially when you get into household data and the number of participants or people living in a particular household. That information doesn't exist anywhere we could find it, and that's really critical to determine what kind of an energy burden you have. Is how big is your household? What we did is we implemented our own program, really estimating what those statistics were, but they're really hard to collect. And I think if we get into a state administered program, I'm a little nervous we lose the connection that we have with our members. And it seems our programs are extremely robust, like Mindy mentioned as well. The energy burden topic, I know you guys probably talked about it earlier. I apologize, I wasn't part of that discussion. But I'm a little, during our needs assessment, we determined that housing overwhelmingly was 99% of the issue in our service territory. The food programs were really great. If you looked at the assistance programs that we have that were really robust, that wasn't the issue in our service territory. So I kind of I understand that there are some uniquenesses that go along with energy burden, but I think that one size fits all doesn't really make a lot of sense for us if you consider all the different things that our members are going through. Housing is the big one, and it was the straw that broke the camel's back wasn't anywhere near electrical utility payments. Thank you.
Thanks, Foster. And I guess one question I would have, I guess for you and Mindy too, would be what sort of like the bill assistance piece, how that's locally tailored, and how that would be different than a bill assistance program administered by the state that would have like an area median income attached to it, that sort of thing. I guess that would be a question for me. And happy to follow up too about energy burden outside of the workshop to talk about that more.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's great.
So Austin, I'll just add quickly, one of our main assistance programs is our utility discount program. And folks on that program pay 40% of their utility bill. So that's a pretty high level of assistance. And then we have other programs that some of our voluntary programs that some of our ratepayers contribute to. But I think the utility discount program is a very robust program, and so I wouldn't want to see our customers lose a benefit here.
That's good. Thanks, Mindy.
I would agree too. We have a volunteer. I'm sorry, Austin. We have a volunteer program that we have, as well as an assistance program. Our goal is to, whenever we have a rate increase, that we try to keep our facility charge covered within our assistance programs with low income. And it's worked really well and puts the conservation component back into the low income program, but really helps them out. We have a lot of positive reaction amongst our membership.
Sounds good.
I guess one more observation that we had when we did our needs assessment. The needs assessment was pretty high level, and we couldn't figure out all the household data information that we did. So we just came up with a concept of potentially here's a range of people in our area that may need assistance. In reality, once we started the actual program, it was a fraction of what we were seeing in the needs assessment, the estimations that we had. So when I bring up energy burden, you kind of wonder, how many people are really going to, be in that category where they step up for the program and really understand that it's available. We've done a lot of good work making sure that people feel comfortable coming in to us and make sure that they receive those benefits. But it was a fraction of what we came up with on the needs assessment. I think we overstated those things, and then we thought reality hit with the numbers that we have now. And I caution doing an independent analysis that really doesn't translate to the actual numbers that we have in our low income programs.
And is the just so I'm understand, is the actual numbers just the program participation? You looked at what your need would be, and then ultimately the folks that ended up enrolling it was lower than the amount that you would have been expected based off the calculations. Is that
correct?
Is that right?
Yeah.
There's not like a secondary analysis there.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Foster.
You bet.
And James, could we zoom out a little bit? I appreciate being able to, I don't know if it's me or not. It might be so that we can see the initial question here. I want to make sure we've only got so much time, and I want to make sure we're focused on the particular, how we would get the information to determine that amount, not so much whether or not the proposed mechanism is one worth recommending. We do not plan to recommend a funding source. It's good to hear people's take on that, and encourage folks to put that in their open section of the comments. But I want to make sure we're focused on this question. Lisa.
Hi, Austin. First of all, I just mainly wanted to support Sean and Mindy and Foster's comments. I agree with those. Tacoma Public Utilities also has a very robust low-income financial assistance programs. I'm just going to get in the weeds just a little bit because you did mention how you would determine what the percentage would be, whether it would be a percentage or a forecast, etc. I think before you get to that point, given what we've heard from others, that it's very variable across the state from those utilities that are able to provide robust programs for their low-income customers and those that just don't have the funding or the resources to do so. I guess I would really question whether you could use a flat fee across the state, or it would have to be more individualized or variable in order to be equitable to ratepayers in utilities where they're already paying for programs. Otherwise, I think, I'm not sure who said it, I think you run the risk of utilities dropping their programs. So I just wanted to offer that.
Thanks, Lisa.
Welcome.
Ryan, and then we'll have Tor, and then we're going to move on to the other question here.
Great,
Ryan.
Thanks, Austin. Not to reiterate what other folks have already said, but I really do believe you have to kind of bring this back to what the need is and tie whatever funding mechanism it is to the needs that are inherent in the state, as that will differ between the different service areas, different geographies, different customers, and that need will change over time. And so whatever the funding mechanism ends up being, whether it's a benefit service charge or from the state, we would just urge Commerce to consider making it a dynamic, again, tying it to need and making it a dynamic mechanism that allows the funding to meet the needs and increase and decrease accordingly.
Thanks, Ryan. Tor.
Yeah, I might, Tor Peterson, City Light. Thanks, Austin, for this. I think I'm still trying to get my brain around. The first thought was basically, why would the funding mechanism be determined? And once again, I've lost your original question because I can't see it on the chat here. But in terms of why would the mechanism determine the basically resources needed to meet energy assistance need? I feel like we need to back it up a couple of steps and say, what are we trying to solve for here? Is the outcome that we are driving every eligible household, i.e., households under 80% AMI, I guess. We haven't really defined that either. Below 6% energy burden, and then we stop at 6%. Or do we go beyond that? Because right now, our existing programs are not set up like with sort of that calculus in mind. And I think it would be extremely difficult to sort of pinpoint that. And we've already discussed sort of the challenges inherent to having just a single threshold where basically, we've got this benefits cliff that we've created by just having 80%, you get assistance, 81%, and you're out of luck. So all of these questions, I think, kind of feed into like what the dollar amount would be, because I guess the assumption here would be, yeah, if it's 100% of households, 80% or lower, driving them to 6%, then you could generate with a ton of data the budget to fulfill that need. And I don't think it would be any different between assistance benefit charge or any of the other funding mechanisms that we're talking about. That's a programmatic outcome to satisfy that particular need, regardless of funding source. The one thing I think would be different for the systems benefit charge, which we talked about several input sessions ago, Hassan brought it up, that basically for those utilities that are already have programs in place and are fulfilling a portion, if not all, or maybe even more than that minimum level of assistance need, some sort of credit mechanism would have to be established to not basically double charge those utilities for this service. So I think without some sort of crediting mechanism, specifically with the systems benefit charge, we're going to end up dissuading the utilities from continuing the programs that they have in place.
Great, thanks, Thor. And I think the thought process that folks are going through here and is thinking about, okay, so we have to, if we're going this direction, if there's a system benefits charge, we need to know, the goal of the program. And we've talked about different goals. Is it the 6%? Is it simply providing an income tiered program? Is it, a different model? And I think as you start to, calculating the amount of funds required changes that way, and depending on what how the program is designed. And so keep those things in mind as you those different options as you evaluate these questions. Lisa, and then James, can you, while we get Lisa's comment, can you scroll down to the next one, and we'll start there. And for folks who felt that they didn't get an opportunity to comment, please throw things in the chat. We do look at those, and we do include them in the comments. And then also these questions are the ones that are used for our comments, our written comment section. Lisa.
Yes, thanks, Austin. I just wanted to kind of put a pin in one thing. I don't expect us to be able to answer this now, but I think it was Sean that brought up probably something that would be needed is some sort of a needs and cost assessment that would kind of provide a backbone for what we're trying to accomplish. And so I just underneath that question would be, would we have time to get something like that done before June 2024, and whether more funding would be needed? That's just a couple thoughts in my mind. That's all.
Thanks, Lisa. I appreciate that comment. All right. So we've touched on this a little bit, but wondering if folks have any additional thoughts on if it really matters whether if a program were set up, how would it be, how would information be collected and used to inform the amount of funding that would need to come out of perhaps a state funding mechanism, such as a climate commitment account or state general fund. We've heard different thoughts about doing needs assessments, about perhaps those needs assessments include, forecasting costs and then reporting those up the chain. And then the two supplementary questions here are, does this look different under what we've termed the one-stop shop model, which is the statewide administered program that's discussed in the 2023 legislative report for CETA, or is it more or would it be different if we use this clearinghouse model, which people have proposed, where the state is providing information to the utilities about, the low-income households, helping with registration, that sort of thing, is the idea behind the clearinghouse model. But utilities retain administration and primary funding responsibilities under the clearinghouse model. So would calculations of need be different for state funding mechanisms, and then would it change depending on the program design model? Ryan.
Thanks, Austin. Sorry, I also didn't introduce myself last time. Ryan with Snohomish PUD. Honestly, I don't think there'd be a ton of differences between what we just talked about and a state funding mechanism. I think, again, we'd want to tie it back to need and kind of that shifting need over time. I think the two differences I'd probably highlight are, one, with a state funding model, you wouldn't necessarily need to figure out how to avoid a system benefit charge being applied to those low-income households that are ultimately being benefited from the program, since the state you wouldn't necessarily have to avoid that. The other kind of big point I wanted to make, at least for the last two, is that I think you could potentially see a clearinghouse model not crowd out current utility funding programs, so therefore the funding may be less need, or there'll be lower funding levels for the state in a clearinghouse model as opposed to a one-stop shop model in that sense. But again, I think a lot of that will depend upon actually what the program design looks like. But that's just my base assumption.
Thanks, Ryan. Any other comments or suggestions here? I'll take a look here. Sure.
Yeah, just my my one other thought on this one would be if the funds are coming from the climate commitment account, I'd be wondering about the restrictions on those dollars being specifically earmarked to address just the energy burden related to our clean energy transformation, essentially. So there are lots of other, factors that go into the cost of energy provision that, and if those could not be satisfied, if we had to disentangle those reasons, which would be exceedingly complicated, and only have a substream that were climate transition related or energy transition related to be funded by the climate commitment account, then I think we might have an accounting challenge in our future.
I want to make sure I'm understanding your comment, Tor. So the taking a step back into kind of the workshop that we had last time, there's these kind of two different sources of funds that are available through the Climate Commitment Act for this sort of work. There's the Climate Commitment Act allowances that are retired or not retired, that are sold, and there's revenues generated those for utilities, and that funding can be used to reduce energy burden. And then that's something separate than what we're talking about here. And what we're talking about here is that climate commitment account where the revenues from the program are put into an account within the state general fund. And then there's, some 25 different, I think 25, maybe 17 to 25, something like that, different potential uses for those funds that the legislature then chooses to allocate. And one of those could be for energy assistance, and that includes, energy efficiency programs or direct bill assistance, among other things. Is your question or comment focused on the first mechanism, which is the allowances piece, or are you focused on the fund within the account within the state general fund? And if it's the latter, could you help me clarify?
Sure. Yeah, I was focusing on the latter. The former, I think, don't just kind of are a non-starter probably because they're so utility specific. It doesn't get us out of the problem that I think brought us to wanting a statewide solution in the first place. So yeah, just with the climate commitment account, I guess I'm unclear about any restrictions on those dollars to solve energy burden writ large versus energy burden that we presume is precipitated by the clean energy transition. Because my assumption is that the whole point of the account is basic, you know, and the use for those funds is as we clean up our, you know, energy supply chain, that's going to have consequences on the cost of energy provision. So that's a piece of energy burden, right? Is that we're, you know, we're going to see increasing prices as we clean up the supply chain. But that, you know, secondarily, just like every other, you know, inflation vulnerable commodity out there, energy is increasing in price, as is all other aspects of cost of living. So that's the part I was trying to figure if we have to like create a demarcation line on. Can these funds be used for any type of energy burden? And this is notwithstanding the fact that there's going to be competition for those funds to be used for those 24 other, you know, purposes. Does that make sense? I guess that's what I guess I was just unclear as to whether these funds could be used generally for energy burden versus specifically for energy burden related to the clean energy, you know, transition, if you will.
Yeah, I think these funds are for can be, you know, there's no demarcation there. You know, it's funding for bill assistance programs. And I don't think, you know, a utility would need to prove that it's offsetting particular costs associated with either of these laws.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I guess sorry for using up 6 minutes of this meeting.
No, it's good. It's good for us to
unclear on that.
To think through these things. But you're right, there's a lot of competition for these different funding sources, and Foster. And Foster, you're with Opalco, is that correct?
I am, sorry about that.
Power and Light Co-op.
Julie mentioned something in the chat that I thought was really important. Time-consuming process of really qualifying households. What we do is we rely on other CAP agencies to perform some of those services, and then we provide evidence if they receive those kind of program payments are already qualified, then we just you know, use those same stats, so we don't have to go through that administrative burden. So really like the idea of using those CAP agencies to help, so we you know, minimize some of those burdens, and hope that we don't end up in a situation where we have to conduct some of these processes in-house, because that's going to be challenging for us because we're a pretty small utility.
Yeah. Thanks, Foster. Yeah, we focused a lot on that in the program accessibility workshop and different things. And James has got some summary of that work later today, so we can circle back to that. But thanks for pulling that out of the chat. And
you bet.
All right, any other comments here? Any distinctions people are thinking about, or how we would determine, you know, the amount of funding we would need out of different pots? Marielle.
Hi, this is Marielle Thurstonham. I'm just wondering, I'm sorry if I missed this, but what's kind of the thought around projections in terms of CCA funds, how they're currently paying out at higher levels than expected? I think $1 billion over kind of what the expected amount was. That shouldn't last, according to the intent of the CCA. So in terms of kind of projecting towards more long-term funding solutions, if that is, if those numbers are known, or if there's some kind of more thought about that, it would be kind of pretty important to really thinking about a program that is sustained, and not just like in the short term, based on what we know now, how we could like leverage this seemingly substantial, but certainly not like forever available resource. I don't have those numbers, but if someone does, I'd appreciate hearing that.
No, thanks, Marielle. Yeah, what I hear is, you know, that when we consider this particular funding source, we need to definitely be mindful of the different projections for the climate commitment account itself. I assume that would also go for the state general fund, and so any sort of forecasting for a program on terms of what's needed to keep the program its ability to deliver funding to households would need to kind of fold forecasts in to that work. So I think that that would need to be part of either need to be fed into a needs assessment or done separately, however the numbers ultimately fold together. It seems like an important piece to consider. Okay, it looks like we got 2 more comments here. Michelle agrees. We don't have any more questions on this. I'm tempted to move along. So I'll give folks a final second to think about if they want to comment on any of these questions. And while we do, I will saw Francine's question here and about this being available to undocumented members in the dwelling. The current thought around the design is it's a household unit, and that's going to be registered with the utility, and so that household receives the assistance as a whole. So you wouldn't be looking at different members per se and calculating what each household member benefit would be, or if they would. It's a household unit itself. And our program accessibility, that workshop kind of covered people's thoughts, and James is going to go over that later. So these are good questions. And Sean threw something in here I got about income verification. So I'm going to, folks want to chat about that, put that in there. But we'll circle back and, definitely take a look at what we did for the program accessibility workshop for that. Jeff has his hand up, and then we'll move on. Jeff.
Yeah, just a quick comment on this, and I feel like it's kind of understood, but it's important is, between the 3 models, the amount of administrative cost for the state would vary, right? And I think that's kind of like when we think about the idea of data collection and dispersion, that has a cost associated with it. But if some of that is kind of once we get to the administration side of what happens next with the assistance programs, I think if that rests with the state, that has a cost. If that goes to utility where there's already program staff set aside to run programs, obviously that's a cost savings that could be available for utilities of a certain size. So I just think that should be considered and kind of figured into this. And it's soft and kind of qualitative, but I think it's important.
So Jeff, I'm gonna kind of echo back what you said so that I make sure I'm following. That depending on how admin costs are covered for different things, that would be a forecasted amount into any sort of need for either state funding or system benefits charge. That sort of calculation would need to go into a determination of funding need for a program.
Yeah, that's correct. And, as that's a part of the question, I think it's important that kind of gets flagged as well, right? Because there's always the dollars we're trying to get to the eligible customers, and then there's the methodology we use to do that, right? And I think, again, there's, as it's already been said, there's a lot of utilities with kind of program staff and even program mechanics that can be leveraged that can help with that.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, I'm tempted to move on. So, James, let's scroll down here. So the next section that we're going to cover is around reporting requirements and program evaluations. for a program. And we're going to look first at the one-stop shop program. So this is the state administered program. We'll then look at the clearinghouse model, which retains utility bill assistance programs, and the state is simply passing information and cross-checking information for utilities to help with that administration. Thanks, James, for cleaning up my questions. So what reporting requirements and program evaluations should exist to ensure efficient, quality, equitable services and outcomes for a one-stop shop program, or a state administered program, I guess is the question here. What kind of metrics, what sort of evaluation should continue to be done as this program conceptually exists? What would you hope to see to make sure we're doing a good job serving low-income households? So a few ideas to get us started. So I would like to see, program participation. How many folks are being, out of the low-income households are being served by the program. Would be one sort of reporting requirement that would, say, go to the legislature, and would be available for the public to know how the program is doing. For program evaluations, maybe there is a evaluation that looks at disparities in vulnerable groups. Could be Black, Indigenous, and people of color, could be rural households, it could be seniors, disabled households, renters, an assessment done periodically to examine how well the program is serving those groups and to inform the design of the program going forward. So those are some ideas. I'm wondering if other people have other ideas about how this program could best be, how the reporting requirements and program evaluations could be done to ensure equitable, efficient, and quality outcomes. We saw a few here in the chat, which I'll raise just to get us started here. James, Julia had cost to each utility, benefit to each utility's customers, energy burden reduction, energy usage reduction. And I would probably make the energy usage reduction just energy usage. For most studies, a bill assistance program, it has a minor impact on energy usage. It typically goes upwards though, because people are not using as much energy as they need for cost savings, but you never know. Let's continue. Sean.
Yeah, I agree with those mentioned so far, and Hassan's comment there I think is a good one too. Look to section 120 of what's already required. I think it will also be important with either of these to assess the amount of funding that goes to direct services versus admin. That's an important part of the program model, no matter where we're considering is how much of the funds being collected are going to administrative costs, and is that increasing or decreasing over time? I think generally just the average energy burden, and as a state, are we reducing the average energy burden, not just talking about excess burden for those customers that need it, but are we adding to it or decreasing it? Because if it's a system benefits charge and all customers pay, you're increasing burden for some customers. Those are a few, but I think you captured much of what remains important. I guess the other one would be an evaluation of barriers to access. I would think with a one-stop shop model, there may be the ability for more auto enrollment. If the state already has income information or categorically eligible data or information from other state programs, customers could automatically be put into some sort of program here. And so that might make it more effective. So that might be another one.
Thanks, Sean. That's helpful. Thor.
Just wanted to quickly go back to that energy usage versus reduction, statement you just made, Austin, because I do think we would need to leave that on the evaluation table. Sure, we can take the reduction part out, but one of my ongoing concerns with the fact that, like, we've started off this whole design discussion by saying we're going to limit statewide assistance program to just financial assistance is that it's decoupling the potential for reducing energy burden of the customer via conservation measures from the financial side of the house. And if we're designing out a statewide program that's going to be trying to address all or the majority of a household's energy burden via that financial route, I think we're going to reduce the degrees of freedom we have to solve our customers' challenges via the conservation component. So I think it would be important to keep that on the table as a performance metric to see if we may have unintended consequences of that separation.
Yeah, thanks, Thor. And I think that, I think I just didn't want us to not to move that off the table, but not to limit ourselves to just reduction. But we'd also want to see if we're seeing, giant increases in energy usage. And again, I haven't seen that from a lot of the studies that have been done nationally or statewide, but I would want to make sure that we have transparency around that. I wonder too, though, if there is an ability toward, from the question that you raised to be able to better identify the households or connect them to energy efficiency services, the ones that, that sort of thing. And if that's part of a program evaluation piece, I'm not sure about reporting requirements. That would be something of interest if it could get like better connected into that system. Anyways, Foster.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to pile on here or not, but sorry if I do. We have a program in our utility that we're trying to get all of our customers to be as energy efficient as we possibly can, including low income, community solar benefits, a whole bunch of different things. I want to make sure that, that's a solution to make sure people can solve their problem as opposed to just kind of keep, paying out money for assistance. If we can get a lot more conservation minded appliances and windows and all the different things that LIHEAP helps with. But we have a really big program along those lines. And if I want to make sure that during the program evaluations that we take in our ancillary programs into consideration, really trying to solve the problem, not just continue it and perpetually pay out.
All right, thanks, Foster. I think too that for James, who's our note taker, that might be a good one under the clearinghouse. With the retention of so that utilities are making sure they're doing that sort of examination as well. And Shaylee.
Hello, this is Shaylee from the Energy Project, and I do agree with the last comment about the connection between ancillary services, you might say, or other supplemental needs that low-income residents have in the energy sphere related to conservation, weatherization, but also outside of direct energy needs. One of the perhaps pitfalls of a one-stop shop is it's easier to find for this one function, but what about all the other things that folks need? whether they're getting served from their utility and getting connected to potentially other utility programs, or whether they're getting served from a CAP agency or another organization and getting information and services from a variety of wraparound options to help get people on their feet. So we need to keep in mind how any of these models help with that wraparound need. And one-stop shop is perhaps a little more challenged than a couple of the other models. The other metric that I was going to suggest for measuring, and I think it applies to all the models, is crisis level, whether people who are coming to seek assistance are in an active energy crisis, they have an urgent or past due or shut off notice, or they've been disconnected, and whether the program is helping to effectively alleviate crises.
Great, thanks, Shaylee. And again, I think for my clarity is the wraparound services includes things like getting them connected to food assistance or getting them connected to other programs that are available to help them, and making sure that we are evaluating how well the program is. I'm not sure if that's a program evaluation, and would welcome more thoughts on how that would be evaluated versus a program design element that we need to just needs to be part of the overall framework of the program from day one,
right?
It's something that's ongoing, and would be happy to talk about that.
Yeah, one way that might maybe not 100% answer the question in terms of evaluation, but it would get you started, would be to take data, in addition to demographic data, take data about whether households are already enrolled in other types of services when they come to a model like this. Do they already have SNAP food assistance? Are they already connected with other DSHS services? Do they know about their local CAP agency? There's ways maybe to capture how dialed into resource networks they already are when they first come, versus and then the ability to flag specific accounts or scenarios that would be good candidates for follow-up, perhaps.
Perfect. Thanks, Shaylee. Francine.
Good afternoon. So my vision of the one-stop shop is if there were a statewide database, which I thought the Washington State Benefit Portal was supposed to be that, where a customer would go to one location, put down their household information, and then that application would look at their zip code or whatever, and it would filter out what programs they're eligible for in their particular area. And that customer would then either be contacted by those programs, or they could reach out to those programs. That way they could see if they were applying for utility assistance and they went to that general Washington State Benefit Portal and it said, okay, you've applied for this, but based on your information you provided, you also qualify for, or may qualify for, dental coverage or medical benefits or whatever. And then that person would know, oh, there's other things, because oftentimes when a customer is looking for assistance, they're looking for that immediate need. They're not realizing that, yeah, they need help with their current utility bill, but the roof is leaking. So if it connected them to other programs that could help with that, that's where they would get that information from. So a one-stop application where the basic information, what's your name, how many people in your household, what is your household income? That's something that I think all of the programs are based on. And then from there, whatever programs that customer is eligible for would be presented to them so they could see that there are other options for them. So while I think that this is a really good opportunity, and I'm really thankful that there's so much focus being placed on our vulnerable customer populations, I hope we do it right instead of do it fast, so that we can get it the right way instead of just trying to get the money out the door or trying to invent the wheel again when there's already wheels turning. So with the state, I would ask that there's already programs available. I know the state program for LIHEAP is administered by the state, but it's a federal program. And it would just be really nice that if there were a centralized way that a utility, we want to provide information about customers, but we need the access to be able to receive information about customers too, so that we can better serve them. When customers come into our, for Tacoma Public Utilities, when a customer applies for services for help with their utility bill, we also look to see if they're eligible for our weatherization programs. If whatever else they might be eligible for any other programs, if they're a homeowner, what other programs might they be eligible for? And I just think that there really needs to be a focus put on a holistic approach to serving our customers without making our customers go to 6 different places to apply for assistance. So again, while I think that this is a great opportunity for our customers to get help, I just hope that there's as much focus put on to making it simpler for customers to get the help without having to go 6 different places, as it is to, look at what funding sources are available for these households. Thank you.
Thanks, Francine. Very helpful. All right, any other sort of reporting requirements, evaluations, that, things we should be considering here? And I welcome, ideas from other areas. I saw here, should take a second to look in the chat here. There's folks who flag for us, renters versus homeowners is probably something that kind of is cross-cutting here. I saw it in here. Hassan said, basically the CETA goals, or CETA, I shouldn't say CETA goals, the CETA requirements for reporting might be a good basis to start. But it would be, not at the utility level. It would be done at the state level. Support for the idea of looking at arrearages and disconnections, sort of things. And then we got a whole list here from Kalima. I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I apologize if I don't. Around different aspects. Marielle.
I just wanted to make sure that we are all on the same page, or if I am brought onto everyone else's page about who is reporting to whom. And I know right now we're talking both around like the specifics of what the reporting could be, just like the data, the information, and some of the purpose of that, tying that purpose to kind of the larger purpose about meeting need, reducing burden, and supporting the most vulnerable customers. The specific purpose as well around reducing barriers, reducing burden, streamlining administrative processes, and just measuring success, so you know that we're on the right track, or we're on a track. So just getting the right information the right way. So I just wanted to clarify or suggest that there's increased, we maintain thoughtfulness around what reporting looks like. Just a lot of potential stakeholders and including entities with a responsibility in this reporting space. That can be utilities, can be CAP agencies, can be entities, other entities in partnership with the Department of Commerce and the State Energy Office, and with other agencies maybe. So if that isn't true, if it's not everybody in this world, if it's very specifically utilities, I just wanted if you could speak to that, it's already very clear and everyone knows what we're talking about here. And if it isn't, if it's still, it is pretty broad. And it's just about like, getting the information to kind of track purpose, performance, and continue to develop the program model to more statewide approach to coordinated burden reduction, energy systems meeting. So is it clear to everybody, or is it also space for being thoughtful of participants and participation type? I apologize for the background noise.
Yep, good question, Marielle. My thought here is that this is for the one-stop shop model, is that the state is the responsible administered entity, and that so its primary reporting obligations will be for the purposes of informing the legislature as well as the public about the performance of the program. And that includes low-income households and partners in the program who are, need the information to understand where we are as a state in providing assistance to households. I don't see a reporting requirement under a one-stop shop placed, for like program participation and that sort of thing on utilities. I assume there would be some sort of, audit or, some sort of thing where you would look at, to make sure that the funding that is, being distributed, no matter where it comes from, is being applied to low-income households, to make sure that that sort of thing is being used, which is the assumption. And I really don't know enough about auditing if that's the sort of thing that would happen in that situation or not. But the point being that those sorts of program assessments or reporting wouldn't be taking place at the utility level, because the state is the one administering the bill assistance program. Now, utilities, I think it's an open question as to whether there's still reporting on energy efficiency, weatherization programs, that sort of thing. Utilities themselves may want to do their own internal reporting and evaluation based on the data that comes from the one-stop shop for any other sort of programs that they're running, like their energy efficiency and weatherization programs. And I think there's, an open question as whether, depending on how the program's structured and how partnerships are, if folks are receiving funding through the statewide program, the assumption would be there's reporting requirements and program evaluations that are going to be required for those that are receiving funding. But again, the state is the responsible entity here, and so for the one-stop shop program, the reporting requirements to me are primarily required on the state entity administering the program. So I hope that helps clear up that. Then the clearinghouse model, the clearinghouse one is an idea that's floated by a couple utilities, and the idea is that the utilities continue to administer their programs. And so when we move to that conversation, the question is what reporting and program evaluations are required of utilities to ensure efficient, quality, and equitable services under a clearinghouse model where the state is providing what's assumed to be kind of substantial information to help the utilities out. Thor.
Yeah, thanks, Austin. Back to that point of evaluation, and maybe I just didn't hear it when someone else mentioned, but I want to hear from our I want to hear from our program participants, or actually from the eligible households, how they feel this is going for them. So I would hope that some evaluation, and whether clearinghouse model or one-stop shop, it seems like it should probably be at the state level to do a broadcast survey touching all utility service territories of eligible households, so participants and non-participants, so that we really get a full-fledged picture of those households' interpretation of the success of the program.
Thanks, Laura. Let's see here. Marielle had outreach and engagement and reporting on that to help track, best practices. That's probably one that goes for both. All right, I'm gonna go shut my window because there's a lawnmower outside. But any other questions on this? If not, we'll move to, or comments. If not, we'll move to the clearinghouse. All right, James, let's move along. All right, under the clearinghouse model, what sort of reporting or program evaluations should there be? And would they be different than what's above? Would it be what we mentioned above would be applicable to the utilities themselves? Are there other considerations given that the design is different? Shaylee.
Hello. My first thought, I'm sure this is most people's first thought, is that the primary difference here would be this is essentially a referral out. So we'd want to know, did that referral end in a service for the client?
Can you explain the referral up?
Yeah, well, based on, if my understanding of clearinghouse is correct, the idea was that the household would input their information, input whatever documents might be needed, and then their information would get sent over to the various organization, utility, et cetera, who administers the service for their region, right?
I'm not that is different than my conception.
Okay.
But
Then
it doesn't mean that it's not a version of this that should be explored or what have you. My understanding of this is that utilities continue to be the ones responsible for administering the program. So I assume they would continue to be working with the community action agencies or other partners that they'd work with, and that the state provides a better way of verifying income and perhaps cross-enrolling households into utility programs. So that if a household showed up at a utility or more likely community action agency, you'd be able to better see whether that customer is eligible because they're already enrolled in SNAP or some other thing. But it would that's my understanding, and I took your question to be that are the referrals, like, are they
like, does their participation result in additional enrollments, I guess, then in that case? Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah. And I think that to me also flags, like to your question about wraparound services or, timeliness, reporting about timeliness of, how quick are we getting people enrolled in the program, or are there wait lists? Are there people who are not getting helped, because that's a big concern with the current model.
Thank you.
Any other ideas here? How do we get better transparency and accountability through a clearinghouse model? So under each of these, I've also asked a question about how often should, reporting or program evaluations be done for these different things. I think it's always important that we collect data for, again, making sure that outcomes are clear for folks, that we can conduct an evaluation. If we don't have any data, it's very much relying on just, hey, we think our program's doing pretty good, and not, really grounded in the quantitative aspect of a thorough or qualitative. As Dora pointed out, there's other pieces to that too. And so we'd want to make sure that we have the data to continue to improve the program and make sure that the effort folks are putting in is paying off in terms of outcomes for households. So don't want to have, my general thought is the frequency should be rather regular, but how often, and we don't want either model to be too burdensome. All right, well, James, Jap, go for it.
Sorry, Austin. I was trying to decide when to be annoying and speak up. Here we go. Snohomish County PD, and I think you mentioned this a number of times when we were kind of looking at the one-stop shop model, and I don't know how to quantify it, but the benefit of the clearinghouse and the difference from a collection standpoint too, I think would be to see, what other outcomes are served, beyond, say, the energy assistance piece alone, because we've kind of talked about how, many of us have Energy Independence Act requirements, and I would imagine just other ways to kind of thread, regulatory expectations. And so I think finding a way to sort of measure not just the assistance or the energy burden reduction through this model, but also how it feeds into other obligations that we have, I think, would be a powerful way to determine, is this effective, or should it be tweaked further, and that sort of thing.
And this is other outcomes for utilities, is that correct?
Exactly. And I mean, I think we could even be really specific, other state regulated outcomes for utilities.
All right, James is writing it down there. Thanks, Jeff. Francine has a question about, whether we've looked at assistance. It's framed here as a permanent assistance program for water, and water utilities is covered over at the Department of Health. I'd refer you over there for the current status on assistance programs for water. That's not what we're been asked by the legislature to look at. Good questions. I think too, I mean, we're going to go talk about, well, we're going to have this question here about LIHEAP. and then field questions folks have about LIHEAP, and just gather them, I should say, not field them. We're just collecting questions folks have, and we'll bring back a summary response for those. But I think it's an important piece just to kind of walk into this conversation with that LIHEAP is available statewide, but there's a lot of funding is one piece, but eligibility requirements, the way the funding is rolled out, a lot of different pieces that led to the legislature asking about a program that's more of a monthly bill assistance program, and that's why we're looking at what we're looking at today. So Thor.
Yeah, actually, the water assistance question actually prompted in my mind the fact that City Lights Utilities Discount Program has a sister water assistance program through Seattle Public Utilities. We've offered them in conjunction for 40 years now. One of my concerns, both like on the kind of reporting and evaluation front, under the one-stop shop model, would be if it would force us to kind of disaggregate that long-standing holistic utility burden writ large, as opposed to just energy burden, electric burden, city light element from our program. There's something I think that speaks to a lot of commoners' concerns, as we've heard around wraparound services, costs of living, overall burden that Washingtonians are facing. That if we have a singular one-stop shop model just specifically on energy burden at the state level, again, does it sort of preclude, like our energy efficiency, the energy efficiency measures point that I brought up earlier, might it get in the way of us looking holistically at our affordability challenges that Washingtonians face?
Yeah, thanks, Thor. I think when I think about the Seattle program, the integration between the water program and the electricity program, if it were administered by the state, it'd be something to look at. How well those could be integrated for folks. All right, well, let's take a 10-minute break. We'll get back together at 2:50, and we will maybe, James, you can scoot us over to the LIHEAP questions, and folks who don't need to take an urgent bathroom break can focus on those. You can share the screen there for that while we wait, and then we'll come back and we'll go through that. And then we will get to James's summary of the comments that we have received so far. So, all right. Thank you all. See you in a few. All right, I see a cursor moving. James, are you back?
I am, yes.
All right. Well, folks, get back to the computer. Why don't we scoot the LIHEAP questions onto their own page? Yeah, that's my bad for not laying out the document in a very good way for us to work from. All right, well, it's about 2:50, so we're gonna get back to work and talking about a different part of program administration, which is the integration of a statewide program with LIHEAP, the state's low-income home energy assistance program. This program is a program that comes out of the 1960s, Great Society, LBJ sort of era. And it's been on the books for quite a while now. It's been revised and different things, and it continues to be, all the requirements and everything are set through the federal government by Congress. There's really not a way to tweak that, those different requirements and the way the program is run. It is a program that is housed at Commerce. Households go to community action agencies typically, or other entities, and apply for LIHEAP funds. And then those funds get applied to customer accounts in the end. It's a kind of a lump sum amount. But there are many ways in which the LIHEAP can be structured at utilities, and the way that it gets applied. And the reason why we are asking about this topic is from our initial workshops on key questions and considerations, there was, and even the funding is the idea that this is money that's coming from the federal government, and we want to make sure that we use those funds. And sometimes this was framed as, or is commonly framed as being, we need to use these funds first. So I'm trying to understand how, folks currently are using LIHEAP dollars, how they either prioritize or do not prioritize applying LIHEAP dollars to customers who are also enrolled in utility bill discount programs. Whether that they're kind of stacked on top of one another, or the LIHEAP is used first before bill discount is applied, that sort of thing. And so looking for some models, particularly interested if Sean's able to speak to the program that they run at Avista, and others, but open for learning how you guys are running these programs on your side, and what sort of connections exist between your LIHEAP and your bill discount programs. So. Sure.
Sorry, Austin. I feel like I'm taking up too much airtime, but I can let everyone know how it works at City Lights currently. So historically, we did, for our emergency bill assistance, to get access to emergency bill assistance, we did have a prerequisite that eligible households seek LIHEAP assistance as well. And we dropped that requirement during the pandemic, and we haven't reinstated it. In terms of our bill discount program, utility discount program, the ongoing, that's always been separate from LIHEAP, because basically LIHEAP eligibility is agnostic to current balance, whether someone's in arrears or has a credit on their account or is current, they can still apply for a LIHEAP if they're eligible for the program and get the determination for the pledge or grant. So we've treated it somewhat as supplementary to the utility discount program. And frankly, that's been a bit challenging. We suspect that it reduces customer demand for LIHEAP, that they're leaving eligible dollars that they're eligible for on the table, because we've solved a good portion of their energy burden through our robust discount that we have with the utility discount. So it's an ongoing, interaction that we have with our community action agencies to try to make sure that we maximize our customers receiving those the discount. But it's an unresolved challenge at this point, frankly.
Yeah, and Tor, can you tell me a little bit more about the decision not to on the emergency assistance, like who's eligible for emergency assistance, and then the reasoning behind dropping the LIHEAP requirement?
Well, part of that was practicality during the moratoria on shutoffs, and we were, and charging late fees and everything. Basically, that significantly reduced demand for emergency assistance because folks weren't receiving late notices or shutoff notices. And that was also reducing, folks seeking out LIHEAP funds too. Basically, you could build up a significant arrearage on your account, and where it was basically a no interest loan. So I was kind of conceiving of it, from the customer's perspective. And so it just was really, really hard to institute any sort of prerequisite here, go through this other time tax of applying for another federally eligible program, and then we'll help you. That just wasn't something our customers were willing to go toward. As we're moving back toward, we haven't reinstituted late fees yet. We are sending out urgent notices again. That is changing customer behaviors somewhat. But frankly, we need to make it as easy as possible for our customers to access assistance. And that sort of double layer of apply for A and then you can access and apply for B was just more than I think we could reasonably ask our customers to do.
Mm-hmm. And the LIHEAP piece is the idea there is that Seattle Citywide, because it offers a more generous discount than its neighbor utilities or utilities statewide, that the customer, the idea is that the customer is less interested in pursuing LIHEAP, and therefore federal dollars aren't left on the table. It's just that it becomes more a household in a different utility with a different discount or no discount has more of an incentive to pursue LIHEAP than a household in Seattle City Light. Is that correct?
Essentially, yeah. I mean, I was looking at it from the household perspective. That household is leaving eligible dollars on the table,
Yeah.
At the larger system level. Yeah, there's, those dollars are fungible. They're going to move around. Yep. So that's mostly it. It's, it introduces, I think, an interesting challenge from the customer perspective as well. Like basically LIHEAP being something that you would apply for annually and get a lump sum versus the ongoing percentage discount that you're getting every single bill also produces a little bit of a, I don't know, like disjuncture there. Heating season coming up doesn't look as formidable if you're getting a 60% discount. And your bills aren't tracking with seasonal differentials like they did if you weren't receiving the discount. So again, I think that's just lowering the likelihood that the customer would anticipate that their bill is going to go up and therefore seek out those LIHEAP funds.
Mhm. Thanks, Stuart. Jeff.
Yeah, I was just gonna say a quick word of our relationship at Snohomish County PUD with our LIHEAP administrator. So for us, LIHEAP is administered by Snohomish County Human Services, and we kind of just work in partnership with that organization. They run their program. However, we have some dedicated customer service reps that are available to them when they need consumption data for our customers to try to figure out how they are establishing grants. And in the past, when there were long wait times around sort of when a customer may secure an appointment, and when they can actually meet with an intake rep, we would then, those customer service representatives would be able to start talking about our rate discount to those customers as they wait, or potentially some payment arrangements, as they're waiting sometimes 6 weeks to attend their LIHEAP appointment, where they might receive a grant. So that was always really great. And then the other great side of it is we do have a data sharing agreement where once shared customers qualify for a LIHEAP grant, we automatically receive their household income and size, and then we use that to put them on our rate discount if they're not currently on that. And so there's this kind of great reciprocal relationship. And based on some of the comments we've shared with the other clearinghouse ideas, it's a little bit informed by this, where, this is a great partnership where customers can kind of pair these dual benefits together, but hopefully only have to enter through sort of one pathway. And that's been really kind of, pretty powerful. And then the county also administers weatherization. So a lot of times when they're talking to those LIHEAP customers, they're also trying to see, might they be a good candidate for weatherization program as well. So there's a really good relationship there. I think that, the biggest challenge we see, and I don't know if Brian and other LIHEAP providers is on the call, but, again, it's the customers that do qualify that don't pick up the phone and pursue it, right? And I think that's why trying to think about, again, are those customers that haven't pursued LIHEAP or haven't pursued direct utility benefits, are they getting some other benefits somewhere in this pipeline, right? that we can sort of connect them to the universe of assistance that could be available. But yeah, that's how it works for us.
Thanks, Jeff. And when it comes to like applying the funds, is it that let's the household receives $500 from LIHEAP, you have to use all 500, and then for like the first few months that they get those funds, and then the discount applies, or do you apply the discount and then draw from LIHEAP?
Yeah, the LIHEAP just goes as a lump sum directly onto their account, and then their bill is based on the discount that they receive, and so it'll just draw off that LIHEAP grant until it's gone. But the discount applies immediately. It's not one or the other, they get both. Where we see this really particularly powerful, I would say, is with our seniors, because a lot of times those seniors are on a fixed income, and they may receive their annual LIHEAP pledge that will actually kind of carry them all the way through until they get the next LIHEAP pledge, the following year. So kind of that tandem between the discount and the pledge can be really beneficial by bringing those two programs together. Not to mention, administratively, it's a lot easier for our team to not have to do all that income verification again, right? But instead, just go ahead and apply the discount.
Thanks, Jeff. Francine.
A lot of things similar to what Jeff said. So Tacoma Public Utilities, we offer two programs. One is a 35% discount for our senior and disabled customers. The other program is a bill credit assistance program, and that one provides a monthly credit on accounts that are eligible for that program. It's an automatic credit, which is about 20% of the average monthly bill. It's the equivalent of 20% of the average monthly bill. The way that works really well with LIHEAP is every time a household receives LIHEAP, we automatically enroll them because our income eligibility for our program is much higher than LIHEAP. So they automatically get enrolled. If they get a $500 pledge from LIHEAP, most of our low-income customers are in apartments. And so with the amount of credit that they get for the apartment and the light heat credit, if the bill is paid in full and on time, they get an additional credit. And what we have seen is a lot of customers who have not had to pay their own bill because they get enrolled in our program, they get the light heat credit, they get the automatic credit that's applied just for being enrolled in the program. And then with that automatic credit, the light heat credit, that makes their bill paid in full, which generates another credit. So that perpetuates through the end of the year. By the time that credit might be used up, they're eligible to apply for light heat again. So then the focus is just on applying for light heat as opposed to applying for our program every year. It's just going back, getting that money that they can get through light heat and keeping their services on. It's also working with weatherization. So in those cases where we do see that there's high usage, because we do bill for 5 utility services. And in cases where we do see high usage, we do look for opportunities for weatherization, or we have a water program too, where if there's a leak, we have a program that can help pay for fixing and repairing leaks. So light heat is that working together with those type of programs. We're also working with the Tacoma housing authorities, the different housing authorities for auto enrollment opportunities, and any of the programs that have income-based programs where they're already documented. We're trying to do as much as we can in terms of auto enrollment so that we're not having a customer go and jump through hoops again to apply for yet another program. That's it.
Perfect. Thanks, Francine. Jean, I'm pronouncing your name correctly?
Yes. So I'm not, I echo with a lot of what other people shared about cross-referencing and make sure that we maximize the customer's interest. And I'm going to offer something that's based on my previous experience working at the staff, state regulatory staff. I have to say it is really difficult to integrate light heat benefits into the utility program's benefit calculation. So we addressed it in a number of ways. For if a utility has a bill assistance percentage discount program, for example, we made sure that state light heat calculation is based on the pre-discount bill amount to make sure that if a customer get a percentage discount from the utility program, and their benefit from federal light heat will not be lowered. I hope it makes sense. Another approach is, for example, when we design a bill assistance program based on household income, let's say 6% energy burden, we want the utility to have a program that target a specific energy burden. In the calculation itself, we want to make sure that utility discount kicks in only after the customer exhausts the light heat benefits. This is pretty difficult because there is a timing issue. There are some months where the customer will be eligible for light heat, but because of the light heat office is closed, so those customers do not get benefit, even though they're perfectly eligible for that. So that creates a timing issue for some customers. And also another thing I remember is before the pandemic, the utility program could have a account balance threshold. It could be $200 or $500. So if a customer getting benefit from light heat or from utility benefits from the previous time period and still carry a large amount of credit, then the customer will not be eligible for utility benefits for a while until they spend down the money. This is to make sure that more money will be available to other customers. I believe for PSC's program, the formula has have some implicit calculation, and also the fund distribution that connects with LIHEAP. But I see Suzanne is on the line and raised her hand, and so she can elaborate on their program. Thank you.
Thanks, Jean. That's very helpful. I appreciate that. I don't know if Suzanne or anybody else wants to raise their hand or add anything on this topic. If not, we're always open to, getting your written comments. Jamie, could you tell us where you're from?
Yeah, absolutely, Austin. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Yeah, so I'm Jamie Major. I am for Avista. Sean had to hop off the call, and since you specifically said Sean, I was like, all right, I'll cover his base for him. We, in terms of LIHEAP, like others have mentioned, is provided by our partner agency. So we do look to align our LIRAP, which is our low income program that includes bill assistance and arrearage assistance, with LIHEAP wherever possible. So as we're using self-attestation of customer income, when we're using total household gross income, there were many discussions within our subcommittee on making sure that we are aligning what that looks like with the provisions that they're already using for LIHEAP. So we have household gross income with deductions that aligns with those qualifications that they're using for LIHEAP. So they're not having to look at several different qualifiers for our customers. So for example, customers that are employed automatically receive a 20% deduction to account for taxes paid. And we have a list of things to include and things to not include in those gross incomes. A lot of what's already been said, especially by Jing, she used to be a big part of our work, has already been said. So we do a lot of the same things in terms of referrals back and forth to make sure that the agencies are able to further connect our customers to things like LIHEAP and water assistance and rental assistance. And then that referral does go both directions. We're making sure that all customers that we see come across with LIHEAP are also getting enrolled in the utility level programs. Again, like others have said, we do a similar LIHEAP pledge approach where it's applied as a lump sum on their account. The discount is applied to the billed amount after LIHEAP or other assistance. And then, like Jean said, we make sure that the agencies are able to use that pre-discounted amount so that that discount that customers are receiving are not going to impact our agencies' allocation of LIHEAP in any way in the future. That was a big concern for us, really making sure that what we're doing on our end doesn't have an unintended consequence in cutting into any of the LIHEAP benefits available for our customers. So customers are allowed to enroll in all of the programs, right? Our program does not disqualify them for any further assistance. We want that compounded effort to be had with weatherization and LIHEAP and LIRAP.
Perfect. Thanks, Jamie. And it does seem to me that there is these at least two different ways of doing it, where you basically exhaust, if I'm understanding correctly, you would exhaust the LIHEAP funds and then apply a discount. Or you would apply the discount and apply the LIHEAP funds after the discount until the LIHEAP funds are exhausted and the discount remains. So, which is like the Snohomish version. And then I'm hearing that the IOUs are doing something different. Maybe I'm at a very high level missing that piece. Brian and then Suzanne, and then we got to move on.
So I'm just going to seek a little clarification on this. So when LIHEAP funds are used, you're charging one amount, but when it comes back to the customers, they're getting the lower amount and getting the discount. What if they come back the next year? Are you then charging LIHEAP full cost and then switching the discount rate back on? I need clarification on that because, yeah, just curious. When we pay a higher amount. When the customer pays, they pay a lower amount, even though this is to benefit the customer. I need to do some digging on that piece if that's what I heard.
Okay, well, thanks, Brian, for flagging that, and encourage people to either throw it in the chat or connect with Brian or put it in the comments that we collect. Suzanne, and then we're going to move on to our next piece.
Okay, I'll speak quickly to, this is Suzanne Sassville, Puget Sound Energy. Currently, we're on the cusp of starting a new program year, and self-declaration of income is going to be in effect October 1st. And so today, customers have gone through appointments, and at that time, were regarded for both LIHEAP and PSC help eligibility at the same time. As we transition to self-declaration, we will know the customer's income and will be informing agencies of those clients that are LIHEAP eligible, as well as, they will be able to see the ones coming in that are LIHEAP eligible, and then we'll be able to communicate with them, or we also are sending an email informing the customer to contact their agency or speaking it to them when we've communicated with them. So that's how we'll be operating going forward, with making sure customers that come into our system and are getting the necessary LIHEAP.
All right, thanks, Suzanne. All right, we are going to move, and we'll can't remember how much time we ended up for this particular question, but we'll do next 15 minutes. This is the time for you to ask questions you have about LIHEAP. We're not in a, we're not going to be responding to questions today, but wanted to provide the opportunity for folks to ask questions about this program, and we can provide some feedback later on in response to those questions. But I just wanted for folks to be able to brainstorm, put some questions there that might be helpful for explaining the program, what it does, how it works, that sort of thing. So feel free to unmute and ask questions. Don't have questions, you can think about it. I'm sure there are questions because we get them, we get a fair amount of them from time to time, and in the ways folks talk about LIHEAP, it definitely raises a lot of questions about the program. Folks don't have questions. I think James will be ready to walk through his main set of conclusions from our first initial phase of public workshops and comment periods. All right, well, if not, there's another opportunity here to think about what questions you might have about LIHEAP, how it works, how it's serving households, whether there's funds that are not exhausted from LIHEAP, that sort of thing. Feel free to submit written comments on. All right, James, so I'm going to pull up our slide deck here and help us walk us through some of the things you've seen in the comments. Now, I'll just give a little background. We're gonna have to go through these. That's my PowerPoint incompetence. Summary of public comments. So we've had these workshops for the last 4 months, and the final comment period will be in October for this workshop. So we'll have had 5 months under our belt tackling different elements of program design. What we will do is we'll take those. A lot of it has been very conceptual, has not been very concrete to this point, even though some of it is. And we will take those conceptual pieces and we use this information to help kind of narrow down the points that we're going to focus on in the report and in our work to help start drafting pieces, do more research, that sort of thing. And so this is all very helpful for us. And there's obviously points of relative consensus, which I think we're going to highlight here. That's not to overlook points of disagreement. It is simply to highlight the areas that we see as relatively, I don't know if the word's agreed upon, but areas where we think folks are wanting to move forward with some idea. Now we're still at the conceptual level and we're going to get more concrete. So, as we do that, there might be new questions raised, new considerations, etc. But this is kind of what we've heard so far. And in the open comments, if you think, hey, you missed something, or I'm not sure I would agree with that, feel free to do that. Again, this is a very high level analysis though, and it kind of recognizes that there are folks who have different opinions on all these issues, but we're trying to find relative agreement here. I'll do the first one here, James, and then I'll turn it over to you. So this first one comes from the work that we've done together. We've had folks propose 2 different models for a statewide program, and we've referenced those today. One is this one-stop shop model, which I think is the vision in the report that was published earlier this year for Section 120, in which the state would become accountable for the program and program performance and be administered by the state. And then there's the clearinghouse model where utilities are administering the program, but there's increased information about low-income households kind of provided by a state, information exchange, that sort of thing. But utilities will remain accountable for the program outcomes and performance of their programs. So those are a high-level summary there of those 2 models. James, why don't you walk us through these and tell me when you need the slides turned.
All right, thanks, Austin. And I'll echo both you and Michael in expressing gratitude for everybody's participation in both the workshops as well as our written comment periods. We've received a lot of interesting and important feedback, and I'll also echo the fact that these summaries are by no means comprehensive. I think our written comments alone are totaling almost 150 pages or thereabouts right now. So just a very high-level summary of what we've heard in both the workshops and the written comment periods. And this slide here touches on, I believe it was our second workshop on elements of program accessibility and what we heard around what it would mean for a statewide program, whether that's the one-stop shop model or the clearinghouse model to be accessible. We've heard that multiple application and enrollment methods, including those that don't require internet access or travel to a physical location, are an important way of making a low-income assistance program accessible, particularly for folks who may not have reliable broadband access or the ability to travel. We've also heard that eligibility criteria should include all low-income utility customers, and that documentation should be minimized in terms of what is required to enroll in a program. And we've also heard that communications and services, whether that's enrollment services, outreach or engagement, should all be available in multiple languages and should be culturally responsive as well. And you can roll to the next slide, Austin. Thanks. And these next slides are moving into loosely some of the proviso elements that are listed in terms of what we're required to look at for this report. So starting with eligibility, some consensus points that we've heard around eligibility. We've heard many folks say that it would make sense to align eligible criteria with the current CETA requirements, so either the greater of 80% AMI or 200% of the federal poverty line. We've heard that using area median income could help account for regional cost of living differences, especially the King County region. We've heard that immigration status should not affect eligibility for a statewide low-income energy assistance program, and that a program should not ask for documentation related to immigration status. And we've also heard that categorical eligibility should be provided regardless of who the program administrator is, based on participation in other low-income assistance programs, whether those are state, federal, or other programs. What we've heard in terms of consensus points around enrollment is that traditional income verification procedures requiring a relatively large amount of documentation create a barrier to program access. And so self-attestation when it comes to income with a small random set of incomes verified after the fact is one way to balance the goals of having a program that's both accessible but also has program integrity. We've also heard that multiple entities should be able to enroll customers in a statewide program, again, regardless of who the program administrator might be, under the one-stop shop or the clearinghouse model. And we've also heard that administrator should be able to cross-enroll customers in other low-income assistance programs, whether those are our government or other programs.
Oops.
On the outreach and engagement piece, we've heard that both outreach and engagement should be multilingual, multicultural, conducted through many different means, whether those are different forms of media, different engagement methods, surveys, listening sessions, workshops, and conducted with best practices and communication in mind, keeping material easy to understand and accessible for as many people as possible. We've heard folks mention the 6th grade reading level as something to target for those materials. And we've also heard that when doing both outreach and engagement, it's crucial to conduct those efforts with trusted community partners, and that those community partners should be compensated for their participation in that assistance. We've heard that particularly on the outreach piece, utilities could post or distribute outreach materials, whether that's on a website or with a bill with consistent messaging. And this was something that we heard in particular with the conversation around the one-stop shop model versus the clearinghouse model on the outreach question. We've heard that outreach efforts should precede the launch of any statewide program, so that folks know well ahead of time how to access the program, what the details are, what eligibility requirements are, and what the process for being enrolled would be. And finally, we've heard that there's a need to consult organizations serving low-income households, and specifically low-income multicultural households, as part of this study. And that's one of the things that we'll be working on as we progress into the fall here, is some community engagement sessions across the state. And finally, on the funding piece, in addition to the conversation today and in many of the past workshops, as well as the written comments about the system benefits charge and the concerns around things like constitutionality and the impact on billing rates, we've heard that spending federal assistance dollars should be prioritized. Again, going back to that LIHEAP conversation and trying to maximize the use of those funds. And we've heard that on principle, a statewide program should have state funding, regardless of the specific source, whether that's general fund or specifically the climate commitment account or the no cost or consigned allowances. But on the no cost and consigned allowances and the CCA revenues, and we touched on this a bit today, we've heard that there's some concern over whether those would be a sustainable source of funding or a reliable source of funding. And we've heard that those are two important goals for funding a program wherever that funding is coming from. I believe that's our last summary slide, Austin.
Yeah, well, thanks, James. And we should give a big round of applause to James for all his work. Not only pulling these slides together, but all of the comment summaries that he does and his note-taking that makes that all available. So really, he's been the hero keeping us on track here. So definitely hats off to James for his work here. Now, again, with those summary slides, they are intended to just help us guide the work going forward, but we obviously need to do a lot of investigating into each of those, further work to better understand, for instance, a self-attestation model. How would that work? Would we be able to provide that level of scrutiny that is both retains the accessibility of programs, but also meets addresses concerns and ensures program integrity. So we got to do some more work there and see if that's a doable thing. But it's something that people seem interested in learning more about. And so I think that's, to me, that's what these slides highlight, or these are things that people are interested in learning more about, or feel they have a good sense of at this point. I am sharing my screen here and see some things in the chat, but I think somebody raised their hand as well. James, do we have someone with their hand raised? I can't see, so you're going to have to help me. If not, doesn't look like it. All right.
I don't see a hand raised, no.
All right. So, if you have comments, questions, concerns, what have you, please submit those in our comment form, which is kind of our next step here. If I can get my slides going again. There we go. All right. So after today's workshop, we are going to have our open comment period, which will be open until Friday, October 13th. The comment form is posted on our CETA Energy Assistance webpage. I will show that here in a moment, as well as some of the other materials so that you know where you can find them. And then, as we've said throughout this workshop, this is our last, utility advocate-centered workshop of this year. That's to provide us some more time to do more homework and provide, materials and pull together workshops for 2024. I envision at least 4 workshops in 2024, starting in January. So we're definitely not done, and we're not going to be, we're going to be going and doing more homework and bringing that to y'all and having discussions about it. We're not going to bring something and say, this is the options on the table. Now, obviously, as we do our research and we figure out we can do this, and we can do that, or we can't do this and we can't do that, we'll bring that to the group for the group's evaluation. But that's kind of where we're at. But that doesn't mean that our work on this broader topic of energy assistance is over. There is more work to be done. The CETA, or 100% clean electricity law, in that section 120 requires a biennial reporting on data and assessments of utility programs, and then a report from Commerce. And that report needs to be to the legislature by January 1st, 2025. That's our target date for it. And it's time to update the data too. So we have convened an advisory group to help draft that reporting template. We've always convened an advisory group to do that work. And this year we've done that again through, fielding requests through our CETA, a bulletin for folks who want to volunteer on that advisory group. And so that's work's ongoing. And then we'll have 2 kind of workshops on the template that the advisory group pulls together. One is a workshop for utility staff at small utilities in the state. And that's going to be on October 10th at 10 a.m. And it's a 2-hour workshop. And why we are doing a workshop for small utilities is that the advisory group, unlike previous years, does not have any members from small utilities across the state. We reached out, we did a lot of work to try and find folks, but ultimately folks said they did not have capacity. And so we proposed this, and that seemed to work for them. So we are going to have that workshop in that space for our small utilities to discuss the reporting template. It has been helpful that we last year, when we did the initial work, we talked with I held a separate meeting with a sample of small utilities and got their feedback on the reporting process and the reporting requirements. And so we've been feeding that into the current advisory group in the absence of any staff from small utilities. But this will provide another opportunity for folks to review it from that perspective. And then there's an opportunity available to all utilities, including our small utilities, on October 19th. We will go through the draft template together, and then there will be a comment period on November 3rd, our comment deadline, I should say, for folks to submit suggestions, revisions, what have you, with the template. And the final reporting template is scheduled to be published on November 13th. The due date for that work has not been set, but it would be no earlier than March 1st. So that could give folks the same amount of time that they had last time, and with a year's experience, a couple years, 4 years now of having the law in the books, folks should be able to fill out the form relatively quickly, hopefully. And that's the goal. And then finally, as James mentioned, we're going to do some workshops around the state with by and for organizations and those that specialize in providing low-income household services to gain their perspectives and input. And what we learned from them will be brought back to the group in our workshops in 2024. So you won't miss out on their feedback, and all of that information will be documented and ready for review for folks. I think that's the last slide. We've got our slides for our contact information. Feel free to reach out to us. Let's see, does anyone have any questions? If not, I'll have to show one more thing here. So this is our energy assistance webpage, where we've had our statewide program design study. Here's our agenda and meeting materials today. Here's our comment deadline, where you click the comment form, it'll take you to the smart sheet to answer the questions. And then what you see here is all our past events. I think we need to reorganize this page because we're getting a lot of things on here. So we'll probably condense it to a Word document with all the materials still there and post that on the page. But then here is the Section 120 reporting template information. The workshops that I mentioned for that reporting template are here with meeting links. Should add one about the comment deadline. But this reporting template stuff, because this will become the primary work, will probably move up to the top of the web page, and the statewide program design study stuff will come underneath that until our reporting template is finalized and we have folks sufficiently getting going on their reports. So I want to thank everybody for their participation in today's workshop, for participating in our last 4 workshops. This is a lot of content, a lot of ideas to think through and pull together. And I just really appreciate the comments and what folks brought to this work. I think it's very meaningful for just better understanding how we can provide these services to low-income households. So I appreciate all your work, for taking the time to show up, and I hope you have a good rest of your fall. For those of you I don't see on the Section 120 reporting work, and always feel free to reach out if you have questions. Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.